Joining us now with reaction is the author of Treason, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Thanks for being with us, Mr.
Delighted
Speaker.
to be with you.
Fantastic. So a lot of news to discuss that's been going on this past week and especially today. Let's talk about the latest development in Afghanistan and the president's decision to drop this massive bomb. What kind of message does this send to North Korea and Syria, let alone ISIS?
Well, I think, first of all, the decision to use the largest non-nuclear bomb that we have sent a clear signal of strength, building on what he did last week with Syria, and is also a reminder both to the Russians and to the North Koreans that we have enormous assets if we want to use them. I think it's very interesting. You now have, with General Mattis and with General McMaster, real professionals who are giving the president serious military advice, exactly the sort of thing that Barack Obama always rejected. And I think what you're finding is that when the president turns and says, what are my options, it turns out there are a lot more options than Obama ever thought there were.
Well, it's very interesting that you bring this up, and I heard you discuss this earlier in the day, but a markedly different approach to foreign policy, to military intervention we've seen in less than the first 100 days of the president being in office.
Yeah, I wrote a newsletter last week at Gingrich Productions pointing out that there are a lot of parallels between President Trump succeeding the weakness of Obama and President Reagan succeeding the weakness of Jimmy Carter. And they both had decisive moments. In Reagan's case, it was shooting down 2 Libyan aircraft over the Gulf of Sidra. In the president's case, it was firing Tomahawk missiles last week, by the way, while at dinner with the Chinese president.
Right.
So I think that that's useful. And by the way, somebody made a comment to me that was fascinating. They said if you were to take video of the foreign minister of Russia meeting with Hillary Clinton, meeting with John Kerry, and meeting with Rex Tillerson, it would give you a real sense of how much real power Tillerson carries just in his bearing, in his sophistication, in his maturity, because he's different than the other people that Lavrov has worked with. And I thought that was a fascinating commentary on what a great job Secretary Tillerson's doing for America.
Yeah, fantastic. You saw a lot of kind of feedback, people saying, how they thought that he did. I thought it was very strong and decisive, and he showed no hesitation in bringing up directly to Putin and the individuals there all of the issues and problems that the United States has with Russia. Wow, this must have been quite a surprise to all the people that thought that the president was going to be so chummy with Putin and not be strong with Russia.
Well, look, I think if President Trump could find a way to do it, he'd like to be friends with Russia.
Right.
He doesn't have any great interest in going out of the way to start a fight, but he's not going to give an inch on things like gassing children, which I think really got to the president emotionally. And the fact is that Rex Tillerson, when he was the head of ExxonMobil, had negotiated several multi-billion-dollar deals with the Russians. He knows how to deal with them. He's not afraid of them. He's not confused by them. And without being hostile, he was very direct.
Yes, absolutely. And you have to be firm. And now we are getting to see exactly what kind of president Mr. Trump is. And he's being very true, it seems to me, to his campaign promises and being decisive and using the strength of the American military, which he has already shown a great respect for. So I want to segue a little bit about North Korea. A new report says that North Korea could be preparing a new nuclear test. And if they do, how should President Trump respond?
Well, the more fascinating question is, what are the Chinese going to do? Yes. The Chinese have moved 150,000 troops to the North Korean border. They have changed their purchases of coal and have tightened up on sanctions against North Korea. And they have said publicly that the North Koreans had better not engage in this nuclear test. And remember, if it's an underground facility, what we just proved in Afghanistan was we have weapons which, without going nuclear, we have huge non-nuclear conventional weapons that could take out these kind of facilities. So I think the Chinese are trying to say to him, look, you got to take President Trump seriously. This is not like the good old days, and you better be careful. So the first reaction ought to be, let's look at the Chinese, who, by the way, did abstain at the UN. And President Trump was exactly right to say this was a major step in the right direction when, on the Syrian resolution, They abstained, leaving the Russians all by themselves as the only country voting no.
Absolutely. Now, do you think that it's, you know, we can have this kind of confidence in terms of the relationship with, you know, the president of China and President Trump working together cooperatively? Because I think people are concerned because nobody seems to be able to control North Korea and Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, and I'm not sure the Chinese can either, so I don't think you can wave a magic wand. But what was clear to me was that President Trump recommended that they go off by themselves, get away from the staff. They had a 2-hour meeting the first day, they had another 1-hour meeting the second day, and apparently the chemistry was very good. You may remember that Reagan did the same thing with Gorbachev when they first met. He said, let's go for a walk, let's just get out of here, and just you and me and the interpreter. I think that that does lead to a different attitude, a different willingness to work. I think that's what President Trump hoped he could do with Putin, and Putin has simply been too difficult to deal with to try to have that kind of a personal conversation. But I do think there's a possibility that we're on the edge of some serious progress with China.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you bring up such a great point because it's that interpersonal relationship, that dynamic, and establishing that bond that it appears that President Trump successfully once again did with President Xi, that he can pick up the phone, call him, work cooperatively with open lines of communication. I mean, that's real leadership, and someone who's, you know, used to being an executive and making the decisions and establishing those relationships. I think we see, if you agree, you know, that this is working very well for this new U.S. foreign policy with President Trump.
It's a tremendous potential. It went much better at Mar-a-Lago than I thought it would, and I think that the president deserves a lot of credit. I also think, frankly, that Ivanka's children who are studying at a school where they're learning Mandarin, I am told that it was a very big hit in China, the video of the children singing in Mandarin. And we shouldn't underestimate that people-to-people sometimes breaks through where policy arguments don't. And they may have gone home with a better feeling towards the Trump family than they thought they would have.
Absolutely. Such a great point. I saw that video and I retweeted. I thought it was fantastic. What an amazing way to connect with the people and make them feel welcome. Mr. Speaker, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great.